Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming this morning. And thank you to Amy White, who is a parent of alumni and current Civil Friends trustee, for inviting Joan Maxwell to our community for these talks. My name is Elizabeth Conley. I'm the Director of Development. I work on the engagement team at Civil Friends and have the privilege to work with our alumni community and parents of alumni, grandparents, and the team that works with our current parents. So I see that there's a diversity of community members here with us this morning. So hopefully I have an opportunity to see you again all soon. This is a busy time of year for us in the spring here at school. We have a number of parent activities happening, and we invite our alumni back for reunion weekend. So it's sort of the kickoff for, I feel like the spring weather is upon us, and we're heading into that time of year. This Conversation with Friends is a new series that we're hosting that was brought to us by alumni that were coming to us with different areas of conversation that they wanted to share with other Civil Friends community members. I think the thing that, regardless of your time at Sidwell or how you were connected with the school, connecting with this community on sort of an intellectual and emotional and spiritual level is really something that the community looks for. And so this allowed us to sort of have events that were driven by the community to come to us with different areas of topic or interest or authors to host. And so we were really lucky to have Amy want to partner with us on one of these first Conversation with Friends. But I share that because I hope you'll keep your eye out for others that we have coming up. We have a few other spring Conversation with Friends planned. We have 2 alumni authors who will be coming to campus and coming to DC to host for their book talks. And then if you ever have a conversation that you want to host with this community, feel free to be in touch with me or someone on our team that you might know. At this time, I want to introduce Amy White. And again, Amy, thank you so much for partnering with us.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you to Anna Wyatt and the Alumni Office for organizing today. So I want to welcome everyone. Thanks so much for coming out. I'm delighted and honored to introduce to you our speaker, Joan Paddock Maxwell. Joan served for 12 years as a hospital chaplain, including 6 years as the palliative care chaplain of George Washington University Hospital. As a palliative care chaplain, she was responsible for offering spiritual support and emotional care to all patients on the hospital palliative care service. Jo received her professional training in hospital chaplaincy at Sibley Memorial Hospital and NIH's Clinical Care Center. She received the Master's of Theological Studies degree in 2005 from Wellesley Theological Seminary and subsequently was endorsed as a chaplain by the Episcopal Church. In addition to launching her website and responding to letters and stories posted by readers, Joan now spends her time crisscrossing the country to talk about her book, Soul Support, Spiritual Encounters at Life's End, Memoirs of a Hospital Chaplain. We're so fortunate she's able to be here with us today. So Joan, welcome back to the Civil Friends community, and thanks so much for sharing your expertise and wisdom.
My next door neighbor. We've been neighbors for 38 years. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah,
that is amazing.
Very travel-y kind of world that we all live in. So I'm very blessed to have Amy and Dan as neighbors and their kids, whom I've known since Amy went to the hospital and picked them up. I want to congratulate you for coming. It sounds a little weird, but the reason is an example of why I congratulate you. Some time ago, I was giving a talk in another area, and I ran into my friend Bob. I said, "Bob, great to see you. Listen, you're coming to my talk this afternoon, right?" "Well, I don't know." "What's wrong, Bob?" I thought maybe he was sick. He said, "It's going to be very depressing, right?" And I said, "No, Bob, it's not. Death is a serious subject, but it's not, I think, this is not a depressing talk." So I applaud you for showing up, and I want to encourage you that it is, I think, going to be a positive experience. But it is serious, so let's start with just a little moment of silence in the Quaker tradition and in the embracing tradition of Quakers. Let's use a genuine Tibetan meditation bowl. And as you know, if you've studied meditation, the secret to a meditation bowl is you focus your attention on the sound, and you keep your attention on the sound. And eventually you're led into silence because there's no more sound. So that's what a meditation bowl is for. I think we forgot something. We forgot to introduce Raymond Shaw, who is lurking in the back of the room, who will be videotaping this. And if anybody has any objection to being videotaped, raise your hand and Raymond will cut you out. You will never hear you. Everybody okay with that? Okay, great. Let me make like a proper educator. As you know, nowadays, when you take a course, they begin by telling you what you should get. Which I always thought was a really sharp idea. They never did it when I went to school. At the end of our time together, it is my hope that there will be 3 outcomes. You will be more comfortable visiting friends and family whom you believe are dying. You'll feel more equipped. If you are now, or if at some point you become, a major caregiver for someone who is dying, you will feel better equipped to support them emotionally and spiritually. And thirdly, when it comes time for your own curtain call, you'll have a better awareness of what you might expect inside. In pursuit of those 3 objectives, I'm first going to read a story from my book, which offers a good example of some of the unexpected things that can happen when someone is dying. Then I'm going to share some of what my patients taught me about ways all of us can offer spiritual support to people who are dying. Then I'm going to invite any questions you may have. So, let me just preface this story with a few things I think you need to know. The palliative care service was relatively new at GW when I started there. And I was the first palliative care chaplain. Because our service was new, most of the patients we got were very far advanced in their diseases, meaning that in many cases they were referred to us just before they were told they were going to die. Often this news was a huge shock to the patient, turning their world completely upside down, shattering their comfortable belief, which most of us share, that death was a long way off rather than close to hand. As the chaplain, it was my job to provide spiritual support to those newly vulnerable people, whatever their faith tradition or total lack of one. I should add that I would sometimes go into a room of a palliative patient and say, "I'm Chaplain Maxwell," and they say, "I'm not religious." And I would say, holding up my little badge, "I'm not from the Department of Religious Care. I'm from the Department of Spiritual Care." And do you think of yourself as a spiritual person? Everybody does. So there was always a place for conversation. There were a lot of patients. The patient list changed dramatically every week, often due to death or discharge to hospice. So I had to meet every week with about 15 new people. 15. Almost all of them gravely ill. I would be given a diagnosis, a name, an age. That was it. And with that pathetic little bit of information, I would have to go into the room of a person in crisis. A person whose spirit was usually in travail and about whom I knew absolutely nothing. I trust you can tell that this was an impossible task, at least in human terms. There was only one thing that I could do, and that was to depend absolutely on the great mystery, which has a lot of names. Some call it by religious names, Allah, Buddha, the Holy One, God, some simply the mystery. Every day before I started work, I offered myself to that mystery. My prayer was very simple. I knew I'd be seeing people in crisis. I knew they'd need spiritual support. And I had no idea what to do. Truly. I asked the mystery to guide me, said I would be willing to do whatever the mystery asked me to do, and acknowledged that without the mystery's help, I would be used. After that, I would go to see the patients on my list, and again and again and again, something would happen. Usually there'd be a small thing, just a little something that would open a space for the patient. It would often be surprising. Certainly never anything that I planned or directed. Never. Just something would pop up and whisper in my spiritual ear. And after that, I would often be privileged to witness or hear about what this great mystery was doing in the heart of the patient. And what I witnessed and heard was beautiful and moving and profoundly comforting to the patient and to me. Let me read you a story from my book, one of my favorite patient stories. But I need to make a few quick points. This book is based on hundreds of pages of contemporaneous notes I made over the 12 years I worked as a chaplain. All the conversation reported in the book was recorded the day it occurred. I changed all names and identifying details in the stories to protect patients' privacy. I should add that the patient population at GW is really cool. People of every race, creed, social class, economic status, national origin, and spiritual belief. Some, lots, none, you name it. A few were famous, many were homeless, some were prisoners, handcuffed. Some were visitors from other countries. They ranged in age from early 20s to over 100. Some couldn't speak English, some couldn't speak at all, some were remarkably articulate. It was a huge privilege. Every time I walked in the room, I was like, oh, what am I going to meet? How fascinating. Fourth, as I said earlier, I was an interfaith chaplain, meaning that I saw every patient on the palliative service, no matter what their religious or spiritual beliefs or lack of faith. So this story is one where my helplessness was particularly obvious. It begins with me talking with the charge nurse. Since he was admitted 2 days ago, he hasn't spoken, not a word. The charge nurse, responsible for staff assignments on the patient floor, was giving me background on the last patient on my list, Mr. Weldon in room 854. The list showed that Mr. Weldon was 31, HIV positive, with no known address. Religious preference, unknown. I was halfway through my training, and I had never encountered a situation like this. Is he sentient? I asked. I think so, the charge nurse replied. He opens his eyes when you talk to him, but you can't be sure. He He won't speak. Huh. Okay, thanks mucho. The charge nurse turned to pick up the phone and I went down the hall to 854. I prayed for guidance and tapped on the open door. A thin, dark-skinned man was lying flat and still under the sheet, his head turned toward the door. He had curly black hair, close cropped, and a short, curly black beard. He was lean but not emaciated. At my knock, he opened his eyes. Mr. Weldon? No response. Hi, I'm Chaplain Maxwell, just checking in to see how your day is going. No response. Looking into his eyes, I sensed that he was understanding my words, but I couldn't be certain. Now, I need to tell you that in the book, I write down my thoughts as well as what I said. I write my thoughts in italic, and I've not figured out how to read italic other than like regular words, but I count on you guys to be smart enough to tell when it's my thoughts and when it's what I said. This, just to give you a hint, this is my thoughts. What to do? Does he speak English? Is he in his right mind? Does he have any faith in God? If so, how does he think of God? Christian? Muslim? Buddhist? I was completely at a loss as to how to proceed. Suddenly, the morning sun flashed on a window pane and caught my eye. The deer herd. The hospital bordered on a large field, public property, where a dozen or more deer sometimes appeared, safe from humans behind a high metal fence. The window offered a glimpse of a small portion of the field, well away from where the deer usually grazed. But it was worth a chance, and I took it. I don't know if you know it, Mr. Weldon, but you have a special room. A flash of interest sparked in his eyes, so he's tracking what I'm saying. If you look out your window just to the right of the telephone pole there, you can see part of a field. And some days, a herd of deer comes into that field, usually a little before the sun goes down. He turned his head slowly and looked out. Maybe they'll come tonight, who knows? If it's okay with you, I'll stick my head in tomorrow to find out if they have. Just keep an eye on that field around 5 in the afternoon. Take care of yourself. See you tomorrow. The next day, I went back to his room. Hi, Mr. Weldon, it's Chaplain Maxwell again. Just checking on those deer. Did you see them? Silence. Probably just bugging this poor man. He must be lonely, advanced age, no visitors, no speech. Then, a slow, deliberate nod. You saw them, that's great. How many were there? No response. Stop pushing, just let it be. I talked a bit more about the deer and said I would check back the next day. On day 3, another nod. He had seen the deer again. On day 4, the nod was accompanied by a soft yes. Contact! Bless those deer! A few probes got no further response, but he had taken the first step. In the hall, I told his nurse and we high-fived. On day 5, as soon as I walked into his room, he sat up in bed, vigorous and suddenly transformed. Huh? Sit down, he ordered firmly, pointing to a chair. We talked for nearly an hour, moving from the deer who had come yet again to a life review. Sometimes directly, sometimes by implication, he told me about his family of origin, his love for the aunt who'd raised him since birth, his pride in his ability to steal cars, his delight as a young man at showing up at his aunt's behind the wheel of a flashy automobile. Then, his lengthy imprisonment out of state. A walk of several hundred miles after his release back to his hometown. His shame at being homeless and destitute. His yearning to telephone his aunt, but his resolve not to let her see him as a failure. His collapse on the street. The dam had broken and it all flooded out. He talked about his belief in a God who loved him even when nobody else did. We prayed together to that loving God. When I came back to his room 2 days later, he was lying flat under the sheet again, his eyes closed, but his order to sit down was even more forceful than the first time. I sat close to his head. Last night, he whispered. Last night, I woke up. It was 3 a.m. It wasn't frightening. There was nobody in the room, nobody in the hall, nobody came in. It was so quiet. But there was such joy. His faith glowed. From 3 until 4:30, joy in the room. He paused, remembering. Oh, I needed that. You don't know how much I needed that. I didn't dare move. I didn't want it to end. I just laid there, just laid still. No one in the room, he repeated. Just joy. What he didn't know, but what I had learned just before I came into his room, was that in a few hours, the doctors would inform him there was nothing more they could do to try to cure him. He was going to die. We prayed together. I left, and that afternoon he was moved from the hospital to a nursing home where he would receive hospice services. 3 days later, he died. As I think of Mr. Weldon today, I am reminded of the goodness of God who brought him such joy at the last, and whose dear were so exceedingly faithful. Every word is true. This story is a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier. I knew nothing at all about Mr. Weldon. Nobody knew anything about Mr. Weldon. He wouldn't speak. The sunlight winked at me from the window, and I hadn't thought of the deer until the sunlight met. Then, just because I kept showing up and being present to Mr. Weldon, he trusted me enough to speak, to tell me his life story, and then to tell me the day after it occurred of his wonderfully graced experience at 3 a.m. Federal demographers tell us that death is on the rise, and will be on the rise for the next 10 years or so. This does not mean that life expectancy is lowering. It means that the population bulge, known as the baby boom, is working its way through the life cycle. This means that most or all of us will be needed by more friends and family to offer them spiritual support as their lives draw to a close. And of course, sooner or later, it will be our lives that draw to a close. So let me turn from those stories to offer some more specific information about what we can do under those circumstances. And let me add that although I learned this as a hospital chaplain, I have retired, and I use the information in this show when friends who were dying ask me to come with. And we will all pray for this machine. Hallelujah. Okay, let's see. This is from the New Yorker. It's 3 Grim Reapers. One is on the floor. And the caption, in case you can't read it, says, you never think it's going to happen to you. And that's true. So, what are the 3 deepest spiritual concerns of a dying person? The first is all about meaning. What is the meaning of my life? What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of my dying? What the heck is going on? And that's a great question. Hello, come back to me. That's good. The second deepest concern is relationships. Family, people you love, people you hate, people you are ambivalent about, people you definitely don't want to see, don't let that person in my room, whatever. But it is the human connection. I have never had any dying patient say to me, or any dying friend, I sure wish I'd spent more time in the office. Doesn't happen. But the biggest spiritual concern, the one that was a real surprise to me, and still is hard for me to wrap myself around, is what value am I, the dying person? I'm in bed. I may be too weak to lift my hand. I may be incontinent. I may be all kinds of nuts. But what I'm not is a doer. I am no longer a human doing. I am only a human being. What use is a human being? If I spent my whole life as a human doing, I was this important thing and that important thing and this parent and an ace at fixing cars and a fabulous skier or whatever, you fill in the blanks. I'm not doing that. Who am I? It's really tough. This is not something you can answer, by the way, but be aware that that's a deep inner concern. So here you are, asked to go see somebody who you know is gravely ill. First thing to do before you even get out of your door is ask yourself, why am I going? If you think you're going to fix it, stay home. First of all, you can't. It's impossible if somebody is gravely ill and going to die for you, the visitor, to fix it, either physically or emotionally. That's where it is for them. You can't fix it. And that is so hard. Oh, please, no, don't let this be true. But it is true. Oh, you're going to help, huh? Are you a plan? I'm going to go, and first I'm going to suggest this, and then I'm going to suggest that, and perhaps I can do this, and maybe I can do that. I know. Why? It's not yours to run. And we are so used to running. I mean, there's actually a physical thing. If one person is standing and one person is sitting, the standing one, I mean, here, is sort of talking at the sitting. So you go visit somebody, you're standing, you're up on your feet, you're healthy or whatever. You got to run the show. Wrong. This is why I hope you're going to serve your friend or your family member. Serve means they are in charge, not you. So how does a servant go to a dying person? Empty-handed, you don't need to bring flowers. No agenda, you're not there to help. Unless they ask you, would you take out the garbage? Sure, happy to. But they ask. Listens. Have you ever paid attention to how you listen? When you're talking to somebody, they say something, oh, as soon as she quits talking, I'm going to tell her this. Or, I'm kind of bored, I wish she'd get on with it, whatever. Listening deeply is with an open heart, an open mind. Being guided by the other person. Listen from here, not here. And that's the biggest gift you can give anybody. And you respect silence. So you come, maybe you've taken out the garbage, maybe you haven't. You're sitting silent. Why are people silent? They're tired, they're on meds, they're doing inner work, or they just feel like it. So how does the visitor, who is this, serve? Well, be quiet. Don't talk about the weather. It's a nice day today or a lousy day today or a storm is coming. Don't do that. Be in the silence with them. Just there. Read to yourself. If you have trouble with silence, and I know quite a few people who are not capable of being silent for long, bring a book and sit there and read your book to yourself. So you have something for you to do, but you are also being with them, and they can be. You can also pray silently, you can meditate, you can rest, you can even fall asleep, that's okay. Just breathe And please, no electronic devices. If something happens to the molecules in a room, if you're there going like this, don't. The greatest gift you can give is to be there. And it's a little bit about your own value, you know, if you have trouble with that. I mean, me? I'm just me. But you are you. And you've come. And you have come out of love or kindness or both. And you are there. That gets the gold star. And don't ever forget the third presence in the room. Because it's there, the one that went. You don't have to have any religious belief at all, but there is something going on that is more than just the patient. If you've been present at a birth, you're aware of something going on there. It's the same kind of thing, really. Now, just imagine all of you know this, but in the hospital we call it DABDA, the 5 stages dying people sometimes experience. And this is not lockstep, and it's not necessarily in this order, but it's helpful to know about them, so when they come up, you can go, yeah, I know. Denial, I'm fine. The test was wrong. I'm getting an 8th opinion. I am mad. This isn't fair. It's not right. It shouldn't be happening to me. Not now. I've got too much I want to do. I want to see my kids married or whatever. I am very angry. There is no God. There is no nothing. It's wrong. This is the one, bargaining, is the one that always surprised me. When I get well, I'm going to spend the rest of my life going to high schools and telling the kids don't ever smoke or whatever. Eat right, exercise, do good. But people will tell you this, and they will often have quite elaborate plans. I'm going to put money in it. I'm going to get people to help me. I've got a name for it. Be supportive, but don't get all excited, because almost surely it will not happen. But it is part of the process. It's an understanding that life is a gift, and as you may be leaving it, you want to get and finally, well, not finally, second finally, depressed. It's depressing. It's hard. Sometimes people stay there and sometimes they accept. I don't want to die. I wish I had had more time. But I can see what's happening. I'm okay with it. It is how it is. Now, please, if you are with somebody who's bargaining, don't say, okay, I'm looking for depressed. Just because it doesn't work like that. Sometimes bargaining will go to denial, will go to accepting, will go to anger. But these are kind of the main responses. This is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, as I'm sure you all know. Now, hospice teaches there are 5 things we all need to say before we die, if we have the time. And I have a big secret. You could say it. Thank you. Have you ever thanked somebody for something wonderful they did for you 5 years ago, just because you thought of it and you know, that was so neat, I want to thank you again. That is a way of giving a lot of joy. And often you get a deeper relationship. I mean, there's just nothing wrong with saying thank you. I love you is very hard for some people. I knew a guy whose last child adored the ground his shadow touched, and he never told this child that he loved it. I tried everything and it didn't work. But if you can bring yourself to say, I love you, please do. Because it's a great gift. Please forgive me. You think that would be the hardest, but it's not. I did you wrong. I am really sorry. Please forgive me. People feel quite lighter when they've done that. The real tough one is, I forgive you. I've seen a lot of people die never being able to go there. Now, when they tell you what they have to forgive, it's usually pretty dreadful. And you understand why they're so mad. But who is hurt if there's no closure? The non-forgiving person, not the victimizer. Now, I forgive you does not mean what you did to me was totally fine. I'm completely cool with that. It means that I'm letting it go. It means I'm not going to ever be alone in a room with you again. Don't worry about that. That's not going to happen. But I'm not holding it. It's not like an ulcer in the stomach. I'm aware of what you did. I'm aware of how you hurt me. I have talked about it with a therapist, a spouse, a counselor, whatever. It was wrong. And that was then, and this is now. And I'm not going to take that to my grave. So I forgive you in a certain way, which is limited but real. Now maybe I can really forgive you. I have a friend who was horribly molested as a child, who has completely forgiven her stepfather and her mother, who was aware of what was going on. Now, some people can do it. God bless her. She's a very happy woman. Finally, goodbye. The heart look in somebody's eyes. But there's also something whole about it. Now, I mentioned that I was not from the Department of Religious Care. I was from the Department of Spiritual Care. There are 5 ways people are spiritual. Probably the second one after religion, I think it's almost universal, is nature. You're sitting by the sea, the sun is setting, and the air is full of that sea smell. And it's red and purple and yellow. And there may be a bird going home. It's transcendent. And that's spiritual. Things of beauty made by human hands, paintings, books, songs, poetry. I had a man whose only connection to spirituality was through astronomy. He had a photograph by his bed of an exploding nova. And when he talked about that, I swear to you, he floated above the bed. So everybody has something. You just have to find it. And if you're with somebody and the space is right and it feels right for you and them, talk about it. Because you can give them a lot of pleasure. Actually, open the space and then let them do the talking. Now, not surprisingly, deep interpersonal relationships. And I always think of a deep interpersonal relationships. When you go into the room where that person is, your heart opens and their heart opens. And it's kind of like you're a couple of radios radioing back and forth, heart to heart. That's a deep interpersonal relationship. And there's also deep inner knowing. It kind of touches on this mystery that I was talking about. It can be called spirit, soul, Atman. There are lots of names for it. But it's when you wake up at 3 a.m. and you're alone. It's just you. And you're aware that there is something in you that is more than you. That's what I'm talking about. And yes, religion, for those who are religious, and things that are happening today, a lot of people are not religious. But that's only 1 of 5. I've done this taxonomy with hundreds of dying people, and there is not a single person yet, forgive all these negatives, who has not claimed at least one of these spheres as a source of sustenance and transcendence for them. Now, here is, what's tough. It's perhaps the toughest. I tried to find, I think it was a good visual, visual of control. Well, this here is a male jet pilot, and he's got his hand on the prop, and by gummy, he's going. He's in charge, he's got all the dials and the buttons. He's in control. That's us right now. This comes to us all. For some people, it's not only the loss of control, it's the loss of dignity. Somebody's wiping your butt, to be perfectly blunt. And it's awful. There are people who find this so difficult that they seek medical aid and die because they can't bear it. Now you have to ask yourself, that's sort of I'm a human doing, you know? If I'm a human being, my butt was wiped when I was born, and people happen to get it. But this, be sensitive to this. Be sensitive when you're visiting somebody who isn't whose butt you're not wiping. And just be aware that this has to happen sometimes and get out of the way. Always, 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 always be respectful. I do not care if you are seeing somebody who is in the very last stage of dementia, who is babbling, who is nothing. There is a soul in there. I always think of it as a candle. It is. And it's amazing. I have had some amazing conversations with really demented people. If you listen, in the babbling, there's often something that you have to pay attention. And never, never, never talk about her as if she were a chair. She's a person. He's a person. And they used to be somebody you cared about, or you wouldn't be there. So remember that. And it can be very hard. By the 85th time when they ask you what's your name again, it's really hard not to get mad. It's goodness. When you're with somebody who's dreadfully ill, if you can, offer them choices. Because remember we talked about lack of control? A choice is a form of control. So for a moment you can restore their control to them. Would you like a cup of coffee or a cup of tea? Would you like your bath before or after dinner? Would you like me to stay for 5 minutes, or would you like me to go now? The kind of thing, please don't take this wrong, that you do with children. You know, Johnny, you want to play first, or you want to have your hamburger first, that kind of thing. But don't feel that you're talking to a child. Know that you're talking to a very grown up. But it's wonderful to see the sort of sparkle that will often come to someone who's really ill when they're given a treat. Well, I think I want coffee. And there's a little bit of that. Now, this, stay off their bed. Unless this is your spouse or your child and you know what's under the sheets, because you'd be amazed at some of the things that are under the sheets. Stay off the bed. Don't, come on, sit here, we'll talk. You'd be amazed. There are tubes, there are thises and thatses and the others that really will not be well off if you're sitting on them. So don't. Bring a chair up close to the bed if you feel, if it's appropriate. Or if, let's see, here I am in the bed, this is my head, and this is you. Sit side, sort of catty corner, as it were. That way, they can look away from you. You need to give them freedom and choice. You can look away from them if you want to. If you're sitting, full on, they're kind of stuck. There you are in their face. And they don't necessarily want you to be in their face. Now, when I say consider toileting issues, when you are a human being, you need to go to the jump. When you are a very ill human being, you still need to go to the jump. Only it can be more complicated. So just keep in mind, if they've had a lot of water or coffee or whatever, you might say, would you like a little time with your caregiver? Or would you like me to help you do the jump? I mean, wherever they are in the progress of their disease. It is an enormous kindness to do this. And particularly if you do it respectfully and you choose your words. I've seen patients really, really, really wishing that Aunt Susie would get the heck out of the room, because what they really want to do is something they don't want to have Aunt Susie involved in. That's another thing. If Aunt Susie is there, you can say, Aunt Susie, why don't we just take a little walk just for a minute and give Griselda a little time alone with her. 5 things that may surprise you with a dying person. This is visceral. When you are dying, you want to tell your story one last time. It's called in the trade a life review, and that's what it is. People want to tell. I was born to, my parents were, my older brother was so mean to me, I went to this school, I did these things, I learned these things. They will often be telling you the distilled wisdom of their whole life. And they will do it to whomever they jolly well please. They may do it to you, and they may do it to the lady who comes to clean once a week. And I don't know why, but I have seen in the hospital ladies with their mops and their buckets standing there listening so patiently while the patient tells their whole story. It's often a sign that death is coming when they just have to get out. Now, this is something that really was a shock to me when I first saw it. Person's in bed, lying down, they sit up, they open their arms. Really? There's nobody there. What's this all about? I don't know. But I do know that it's surprisingly common. And people think, when you ask people who work in the critical care and so on, that people are seeing people coming to be with them. I can tell you one story that I was very moved by. I had a friend who was in the hospital that I was working at the time, and I knew she was dying. And you don't usually offer chaplain services to a close personal friend unless they ask you, because one of the advantages of a chaplain is they're a stranger. So you can tell the chaplain, I feel awful and blah, blah, blah. And the chaplain isn't gonna get all caught up in that, oh, don't, or whatever. The chaplain's just gonna hear. So I went to see my friend just to say, you know, that she needed another pillow or something, or that she just wanted somebody to break up her day a little bit. And she said, Joan, hi, you're working here, right? I said, yeah. I said, I'm just stopping by to see how you're doing. She said, sit down for a minute. She sat down. She said, you're working with dying people, right? Oh, yeah. So what have you learned? So I told her all the stuff I told you. And when I got to this part, she said, tell me more about that. So I told her, people see somebody that other people don't see, but they really seem to be there. So that would explain the guy at the foot of my bed, right? And I said, well, yeah, I can't see him, but I believe you do. And she said, I do. I said, is it time for me to go so you can talk to him? And she said, yeah. And then I went. I never knew more. But that, because it was just such a complete off-the-wall experience, I've never forgotten that. And this was very common. Not everybody, just very common. Now, this is just something weird that happens. They're lying on their bed, and they go like this. It's almost like they're playing a harp. I mean, I even wonder if this is why they talk about angels as playing harps. I mean, really. But I have no idea what's going on here. But just if you're with somebody and they're plucking, it's perfectly normal. This is a real shock. You go to see somebody you've seen, they are so beautiful. They glow. And you think to yourself, my God, I forgot how beautiful you are. You don't usually say it to them, but you're just, wow. Usually that means they're very close to death, often literally that day and the next day. I don't understand it, but it's like they're in the transition and they just glow. It's an amazing sight. Now this, I've seen a lot. The nurse tells you the patient is dying. Now, I'm being funny, but you know, when a patient is dying, they breathe in a certain way and they're not talking, and you're standing there and your parking meter is running out, and you're hungry, and you've been through this for months or years, and like it's finally here, and let's get on with it. People almost say it. You know, this was to tell them it's okay to go. I'll be okay, you can go. Sometimes you think people are saying, get going. And there's a reason, because it's so painful for you. They're usually not in discomfort, but you are. I can't bear to be present with this any longer, but I have to be. Please don't be too much longer. So just when you are with somebody who is dying, remember that, forgive yourself. When somebody is dying, the two longest lasting senses are touch and hearing. Now, with touch, a gift you can give is to hold hands, and let me teach you the approved Maxwell hand holding technique. This is very important. Here this person is in bed. This is the sick person, and this is you. Wrong. You gently turn their hands so you are underneath their hand. So if they want to move, they are free to do so. They are not trapped. And you know, you see people, the dying person would just assume enough already, but they can't. But if you're like this, and it's very easy, you just very gently turn your hand over and slip your hand underneath theirs. This is again the servant thing. Sometimes when people are taking a very long time to actively die, there will be in the hospital room or in the patient's room a moisturizer. Gently rub their hands, rub their feet. It's a way of being loving. At the end of life, people are often very dry, so it can even help their extremities get cold because all the blood goes to the sort of center of the body. This is a way just of, I'm here, I love you. And I'm not talking about the weather, I'm not talking about anything. I'm just very carefully and tenderly and gently rubbing your feet or your hands. The other thing is hearing. Do not, under any circumstances, ever say in front of somebody something that you wouldn't say to them if you were sitting down together and having a glass of wine. People who the nurse will tell you, the doctor will tell you, they're totally comatose. They may be totally comatose, but they can hear. And I have proof of it, because there's a story in my book about a patient who was totally comatose for 6 days, could remember what I said. Not possible, right? But it happened. Astonishing. So the comatose can hear, and if somebody starts saying, where does Aunt Susie have her money? Get him out of the room so fast. I've heard that. And the other thing is consider music, but choose it not for you, for them. Music can provide a certain structure, and dying is often not a lot of structure. So I like Pachelbel's Canon, frankly, and I have a CD that's got about 9 variations, and it's just very ordered music. And if they hate classical music, in the name of heaven, don't use it. But don't do really heavy rap, I think, unless that's just their thing. So just consider it. It's really a help, music, and it can be a help for the visitors too. I'm gonna just have to make this pitch. This is for them and for you now, today, here. What's more important to you, the quality of your life or the quantity of your life? Quality. So when the doctor says, if you want to continue treating cancer, we're gonna have to use da-da, and then you say to the doctor, and what does that involve? And they tell you honestly, you're gonna get 2 more weeks of life and you're gonna be thrown out the whole time. Is that okay with you? It's easy to sit here now, we're all fine. I mean, even if we have a serious disease, right now, we're well enough to come to Sidwell and listen to this talk. But when the doctor looks at you and says, if I don't do anything, we wouldn't expect you to last more than another few days. That's a call. So you need to be, I hope everybody has an advance directive. If you don't, you really must. Please talk to your family members now. What you want, document them, they will resist. Oh, Mom, we don't need to talk about that now. Yes, we do, honey. We are talking about that now, and this is what I want. Because when time comes, you won't be able to. If you don't do this, your wishes will not be respected because they are not known. Your family will fight. And you may meet the cousin from California, which is a hospital term. The cousin from California calls up and says, Doctor, you're taking care of Mrs. Chair, right? Yes, I am. I understand that you've discontinued chemotherapy. We determined that it was futile. If you do that to my cousin Chair, I'm going to sue you into the next generation. And sometimes they will. But if the doctor can say, well, madam, as it happens, we have very clear written instructions from Mrs. Chair, and we are doing what the patient wants. And we will continue to do that. Thank you for your call. In addition to the cousin from California, almost a worse outcome with nothing written. The time may come when the person you love most in the whole world is having life-sustaining treatment, and the doctor says, you know, it's time. Is it okay if I extubate them, or turn off this, or turn off that? Now the doctor knows that what they were doing was carrying them along to see if they could turn the corner, and the corner is not turned. So the doctor knows this is completely proper. It's part of the natural course of things. But you, when it's your beloved fill in the blank, I'm gonna kill Mom? I'm going to stop Mom from breathing? Me? Are you out of your complicated mind? No way. And if eventually you get persuaded, you still, you know, I told them it was okay. Now there is something that's a little bit of help just to remember. People go in the hospital and they say, I'm DNR, DNI, which means do not resuscitate and do not intubate. Do not, right? Do not. Denial of care. So you don't want us to resuscitate your mother, you don't want us to intubate your mother. It's, to doctors, it's completely proper. It's the way they talk. There is a new approach called A&D, allow a natural death. Now guess what? It's the same thing. Allow a natural death, DNR, DNI. Allow a natural death? I want to allow my mother a natural death, of course. I don't want to pull her tubes. But if I'm allowing a natural death, then when the doctor says it's time to extubate, if she's going to live without the tube, she'll live. And if she's not, she's going to die naturally. It's I didn't do something terrible to my mother. So please, 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 please. If you're the medical advocate for somebody who's sick, about every single treatment, ask what is the benefit of the treatment and what is the burden of the treatment, and say to the doctor, tell me all. If you have this chemotherapy, you may have another month. But what is the quality of the month? I have seen people actively dying and a nurse come in the room and want to give them a finger stick to see how their diabetes is doing. You know what? No. No, no. Because the nurse does the routine and she is supposed to check every 3, 6, whatever it is, hours. That is about the dumbest thing you'll ever see. Atul Gawande, who is a fabulous writer, has written something called Serious Illness Conversation Guide between the physician and the patient. And these are the 5 questions. The first one, your understanding is, what has the doctor told you about how you are? The second one is, how much do you want to know? The third one is, do you want me to give you my best professional prognosis or not? What are your goals? Is somebody getting married in a month? That kind of thing. And what are acceptable trade-offs? I want to stay alive for Susie's wedding, and so if I am throwing up for a while, I'm willing to do it because I really want to be there. That's an example. Now, I have started, as a gift to the world, a website that is called the Soul Support Community. And there are pieces of paper around, which you're welcome to take a piece of paper. There's no cost to anybody, there's no trick, there's no nothing, your email isn't taken. But after I give a talk, usually a lot of people want to tell me a story about a dying, or they want to ask a question, and I'm always happy to hear and answer as best I can. But there's only one of me, and so this is a place for people to come together, tell it. If you have a story you want to tell it. You can tell it on this website. If you have a question you want to ask it. You can ask it on the website. And you will get, who knows what you'll get. But there's stories that are up, it's still in beta test. The stories that are up are kind of nice, actually. Some of them are really sweet and some of them are a little tough. So check it out. Take one of those pieces of paper that was when you checked in, or they're on the desk back there. Please remember the 3rd residents in the room. You may think I'm nuts. That's fine. I don't care. But just have a little hope that there's something more there besides you and the patient. And that's it. That I have used all this stuff as a private citizen visiting dying people. It's been a huge help. So now you are armed, and you will, I know, be a blessing when you go to see people who need you. So I'm very glad. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Joey, you have a few minutes for questions or comments or thoughts.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for this very useful and informative talk. I have a friend who has a sick mother. She has cancer, and her dad also passed away 2 years ago also because of cancer. So you've talked about how we can support people who are dying. Can you talk a little about how we can support friends who have, or relatives who have, who are supporting people in turn?
Here you can be a doer. Very exciting. You call them up and you say, I'm so sorry, whatever is happening is happening. What can I do? For example, can I bring you a meal tomorrow? Can I mow your lawn? Do you have clothes that need to be picked up at the cleaners? Would you like me to sit with X while you go get your hair done or take a walk? Or would you like to walk with me? Don't ever say, oh, please call me, just tell me what I need. Thanks. That's no help. But give specific things that you're willing to do, and you know what? They involve work. I mean, when you start getting on the do the meals thing, well, if there are a lot of relatives there and each one has weird dietary habits, but I remember this one guy, we actually had to take over a box with a menu. This is for relative 1, this is for relative 2, this is for relative 3, because this one was vegan and this one couldn't be, I can't remember. It was a lot of work. But you're really helping because that's what your friend had to do. So do be specific. The other thing is, if there is somebody there already, say, hey, Susie, listen, I'm going to be in your neighborhood around 2. How about you want to have a walk? Then you can practice your deep listening. Tell me how it's going. And if Susie says, oh, look at the chipmunk. Look at the chipmunk. Is that helpful? Any other questions?
Just talk about palliative care and hospice care. Can you just define
All hospice care is palliative, not all palliative care is hospice. That's the line, and it's true. Palliative care attempts to palliate, relieve suffering. Hospice is when they will not be surprised if you are dead within 6 months. Hospice tries to relieve suffering as death approaches. Palliative tries to relieve suffering. Now, if you have a serious disease, or when you get a serious disease, I would encourage you to seek a palliative care consultation as well as whatever is the treatment consultation. I mean, I'm sorry, I seem to be on a John kick, but certain kinds of medications stop you up. And there's nothing more unpleasant than being stopped up. Palliative care people are really good at helping you with that. And other kinds of medical professionals know about it, but they're just too busy. Palliative care people can also give you someone to talk to, can give you a longer range view, and can help you make choices. Because the palliative care people will say to you, is it length or is it quality what matters to you? And then as your disease progresses, if it does, they can say, okay, Susie, if you make this choice, this will be an outcome. And you told me you didn't want that outcome. So just be aware, now that you're making that choice, is that the choice you really want to make? And if you say, yeah, I've changed my mind, people change their mind all the time, that's fine. But I am in love with palliative care. It's hard to find really good ones, but they are around, they are here in the Washington area. And the quality, just because you're dreadfully ill doesn't mean the quality of your life shouldn't be the best it can possibly be. And that's what that can help. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Question, Jim? Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you so much for your talk. That was really tremendous. I learned a lot from it, and I'm here partly because professionally I'm a grief counsellor.
Aha.
So I'm the other side
Yes,
of the
you are.
door from you. And people often ask me, is Auntie Mabel in heaven? They presumably ask you as well, am I going to heaven? What do you say?
Well, a chaplain is not supposed to proselytize, and I never proselytize. So I usually say, what do you think? And if they say, well, I don't believe in heaven, that conversation goes that way. If they say, well, I did something really terrible, conversation goes another way. But I can't give you heaven or ungive you heaven. I can only help you look really deep into your heart and see what you really believe, because when you're in your final bed, that's what's going to rule. And somebody coming in and telling you something, it's fine, but it's what you have to hear.
I always answer, I don't know.
You don't know, but they do. I had a guy I was seeing recently, and he had done something wrong, and he was terrified. He believed he was going to roast in hell. He was one of the most difficult people I've ever worked with. And I couldn't say, oh, ego te solo. I mean, that didn't work because he didn't believe in God, for one thing. But he had been raised a Catholic as a little boy, and the God that he had been raised with as a little boy was the pre-Vatican II God. This was a God you would never want to meet in a dark alley, frankly. And it was deeply implanted in this dear man. And I'm not sure. He did die beautifully, actually. You want to hear a quick story, and then probably we need to stop. This is true. This happened recently. This man I was called to be with this man because he was screaming most of the time in terror. I mean, we're not talking something minor here. It was loud screaming. And anyway, I spent a lot of time with him, and I did everything that I could to listen and to be and blah, blah, blah. And one thing I did was teach him a meditation, the Buddhist meditation. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well, may I be at peace and at ease. May I be happy. It's a 4-line meditation. And that helped him some, because it kind of contained his anxiety. It gave him, he needed to be a human doing, so he did the meditation. So after a while, he wasn't crying out very much. And I had to leave. I had to go somewhere else. And his wife had learned meditation and wasn't totally with it, but she saw it helped him, so she was fine. Well, then he got really sick, and he was in bed in hospice and all of that. And finally, it was clear that today he was going to die. And he was. She knew that he was really scared. What could she do? So she got in bed with him, and she held him in her arms, and she began doing the meditation with him. But she realized that it was too complicated for him where he was. So this woman who loved her husband held him in her arms and touched his shoulder and said, 1, 2, 3. And his breathing calmed down. And then he started breathing in a way that she had never heard. And she said to him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm singing." And he died in her arms. Understand, I'm singing. So I'll leave you that. That's mine. It made me so happy because it was the wife. It wasn't me. It was the wife. Somehow the sunlight shone for her. She knew this was right for her husband. And he died singing. Oh.
Thanks so much, Joan. Before we close, that was really wonderful. Thanks again. Before we close, Joan is available to sign for books in the back here. And I urge you to read Soul Support. It's filled with many stories like we've heard today about the many ways people, patients, family, friends, hospital staff deal with death and dying. It will give you courage. I know it did for me. It's truly an inspiration. And is an extension of what we've learned here today, so filled with lessons for us all. So thank you so much, Joan, again, and thanks so much for coming, for your questions and reflections.
Good for you for coming.
Thanks, you.